did a video which was about writing topical jokes. It was initially going to be number one of a whole series, and I never made number two. Right? I had lots of people saying, oh, we can't wait for the next one. I never made one for the next one. But 3 years later, we're coming to a sequel to that one, which is going to be about writing a topical news show. Like, how would you write a topical news show? I do not currently have a topical news show, but let's say I had a show where every day I had to come up with a 20-minute or 30-minute episode of jokes, and I was doing it all alone. How would I do it? That's essentially what we're going to discuss. Why has this come up? So I was having a conversation with a producer, and we were randomly talking about the fact that Satirical show, The MASH Report, has been cancelled, right, in the UK. And then people were essentially asking me if I was doing it, right? If I was doing a satirical show, how would I do this? Now, this was just like a fun discussion which we were having. It won't happen because I'm currently not famous enough to have a show which is more. So I do have a radio show, but that is around 6 episodes per year. They will risk 6 episodes a year on me. You have to get to a whole other level before they're willing to risk 6 episodes per month on you, let alone like a show which is 5 times a week or something like that. So either way, I had a really fun conversation about what I would do in a topical show. I started thinking about it, and I realized that I would just come online, have a chat with you guys, talk to you about how I would do a topical show. Any of you who are wannabe comedians could consider how you would do a similar such thing. Now, any of you who are interested in how I choose news stories, there's a whole other Daliso episode on my channel, which is writing topical jokes, which you can check out. But now we're going to go into the next stage. So let me take you to an alternate world where Daliso Chaponda has got not a 6 episode a year show, which I love my show. The show is called Citizen of Nowhere. You can check out past episodes on BBC Sounds. But let's imagine that the BBC, they're stressed. They're like, just give him a show every day, right? And I had to come up with a comedy show every day, right? So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I have to have a show. How would I do it? What would I do to make a news show work? Now, keeping in mind that the MASH Report, for example, was cancelled because people felt that it had a left-wing bias. I also thought it was funny to consider that, because comedians generally just are trying to be funny, especially under pressure. You're just trying to be funny. You're not really concerned about the bias. So in the interest of that, I'm going to try and create a show from very disparate papers. We have got The Sun, okay? We have got The Guardian over here, okay? And we have also got The Times, okay? And I'm going to take out a bunch of stories from them, tell you the sort of angles I would do. I've not actually written the jokes. It would take hours and hours to do. But I will just sort of discuss the ones I would choose and discuss how we would turn these stories into a show. Because a show is not just a bunch of jokes. Like, I did The Now Show, which is a wonderful show, last week. And it wasn't just a bunch of jokes about the news. It was jokes about the news, but it had like a unifying kind of theme, which was inspired by the Meghan, Markle, and Oprah interview. So you've always got to look at the joke and then try to say, if it was a show, not just a joke, how would I build on it? So let's get started first with what are the subjects that I would tackle. Now, in a 20-minute show, you'd probably say jokes, a little short routine about each story would average at around 2 minutes per story. So from these 3 newspapers, I need to pick. Someone do the math. 2 minutes per story, 30-minute show. I need to pick 15 stories. 15 stories, which this episode would be about. So first, let me go through the stories, okay? Tell you the stories, tell you something about my angle, and then we'll decide which of the 15 would be the episode. And hello to everybody who has joined this rather random pop-up Daliso talking about how he would do a satirical show. Okay, so let's start with the Times. Okay, let's start with the Times. Now, most news is depressing, and you have no desire to make jokes about it. Like, it's all stuff about COVID and people dying and people being murdered. That would not be funny. Okay? Ready? I find something which could be potentially turned into humor. Okay? So, actually, I won't show it to the screen. Do just because it's very hard to position. But the story is, Patel may send asylum seekers to Gibraltar or the Isle of Man. Right? Or the Isle of Man. So, Priti Patel is proposed, the Home Secretary of the UK has proposed sending asylum seekers to other places to be processed. Right? And the very simple joke, I would be like, sending them to the Isle of Man? Haven't they been through enough? Right, this is just disparaging the Isle of Man for the sake of a cheap laugh. I think I've only been there once, but still, it's an easy laugh. You'd get a laugh. Now, it's not a 2-minute, but it's a little thing. They're gags you could throw in on like a quick bullet headlines, and that would be one of them, right? So we've got the asylum seekers and Priti Patel. This is actually something which you could go a bit more further into, because it's the bigger thing of what do you do with asylum seekers. It's something that may come up. Okay, so that's story number 1. Okay, let's move on to story number 2. Let's see, what else do I find interesting? A lot of this is going to be you watching me look down. Okay, here is another one, which is absolutely ludicrous. Trump is back, and Trump says, I will beat Meghan in election. Right? Jumping onto the entirely unsubstantiated rumor running around that Meghan Markle wants to become president of America. Just totally unsubstantiated, right? And Trump is like, I will beat her. So there's just something very funny that he's already having this fictional battle in his head. And that, again, would be a possible subject. Okay, so let's put down Trump versus Meghan. Right, like Trump versus Meghan, like this was, Godzilla versus King Kong. Okay, Trump versus Meghan. Not saying that either one of them is one of those things. I was just saying that's the most common versus I know. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going to the next page. Okay, here's another one. This is a very interesting story. Okay, so this is the sort of thing which is just up my alley, right? So, a scientist is criticizing that he has been forced to go into equality training after he attempted to kiss a colleague. Okay? So, this is an Oxford scientist who tried to kiss a female colleague, and he tried to kiss a colleague, and she was not happy with this. But she rebuffed his advances. He didn't press it. He apologized. He sent flowers to apologize and said, I'm very sorry. But she reported him, and so the university has said that he should. They made him do stuff of sexual harassment training, and he just found it humiliating. And he was like, I tried to kiss her. I'm not Harvey Weinstein. I just think it's very interesting in that, like, what should a university do in a case like this, right? Because they can't ignore it, and it's all just very interesting, because I would have to read more in detail about what she said, what he said, what the university said, but that there is what I would call a good 2-minute, if not 5-minute story, okay? I could almost say that 100% that one would enter, because also, it's important, but it's also easier to make funny than something depressing like asylum seekers. I'm not saying that sexual harassment isn't depressing, but as far as I've seen in this story so far, he tried to kiss her. So I can mark that. So that would be promoted to #1 story of the Daliso Chaponda Satirical show. We need a title for this show. Can't just be called Daliso on the news. We'll see what it'll go. Okay. Then, another one to do with the university, right? So there's a university professor this is a Bristol University professor, faces anti-Semitism investigation after he was complained about because, actually, he seems like a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to make fun of him. He's just an idiot. I thought jokes are more interesting when they're two sides. This is an interesting thing. People think that sometimes it's funnier just to dunk on people. But if you are actually watching like a satirical news show, you'll be interested to note that the funniest bits aren't the ones where it's just an obvious target, like, oh, Trump's an idiot, or this person's an idiot, or this person's a racist. It's actually in the gap between where there's an issue where we have conflict. So, for example, I did the Now Show this recent week. You can check it out on BBC Sounds, the most recent episode. The subject which I talked about was Switzerland banning face covering, right? Because that is something where people have very different viewpoints. There are people who feel that it's good they banned it, and people who feel that it's bad they banned it, and it's in that sort of nuance that you find humor. If everybody agrees, it's not actually that funny. It's just, you just get people clapping saying, I agree. It's got to be a little bit more meaty. So, okay, we've got one story so far. One definite story, okay? We're still on the times, people. I thought this would be a short thing. Okay, next hum. Okay, here. Battle over hedge leaves lawyer with 50,000 legal bill. This is really hilarious. So a lawyer faces a bill of more than £50,000. I don't even have £50,000. Okay? So a lawyer faces a bill of more than £50,000 after losing a court battle with their neighbors over a lovely and thick laurel hedge. This is what rich people waste their time yelling at each other about a hedge and the placement of the hedge. Julia Lofthouse sued Nick Hartley after he told a gardener in 2017 to thin the hedge without asking her permission. Okay? So, this is so ludicrous. Yes, this is another one which I think would enter probably the races just because the arguments of the rich and famous, and it will probably climax in a punchline where I offer a solution. Like a cheap solution, where give me 10,000, okay? Instead of paying 50,000, give me 10,000, and I will move the hedge. Oh no, have we frozen? No, I think we're back. Okay. So anyway, we've got battle over the hedge. Okay, so far we've got the professor kisser. Okay, we've got the professor kisser. We've got the hedge. Okay. Let's see. Any other stories we find interesting? If we were going to create a satirical show, here's another one. The word ghetto is being banned. What? In a Danish housing plan. Okay? So the Interior Ministry has proposed legislation limiting and they're scrapping the term ghetto. Now, this is the interesting thing is, people often do this. You do a cosmetic change to try without addressing the real problem. I think you'll find most of the people there don't care that it's called a ghetto. They're probably more that it's at the income stage that it's a ghetto. You can't just change the name and think you solved the solution. Right? It's like it's more than the name. So I definitely would probably talk about the ghetto, the Danish ghetto. I'll do more research. Again, this is literally one paragraph story, which often is misleading. I'll give you a perfect example. I got outraged when I was on Twitter, and which is always dangerous to take your news from, because it's always the most incendiary version of the story. Because I read a story that Columbia University was having segregated graduations, where there'd be like a black graduation and a Latino graduation, and there'd be an LGBT graduation. I was like, this is terrible, this is atrocious. And then, upon further researching, I realized that actually they had a graduation like any other place, and then student groups had places where you could go join if you were a member of that community to celebrate your graduation. And when I was at uni, at all unis, there's the Black Student Union, and there's like the Lesbian Student Union, and there's all these different unions. And this was that sort of thing that you graduate and then you go to like an after party, which is organized by these unions. That's not the same as if the university itself was saying, hey, there's going to be a black graduation, there's going to be a white graduation, and there's going to be... You see what I'm saying? So, anyway, all of these stories, if I had a staff, if you have a show, you'll have a staff, and some of the staff are researchers who look into all of the stories and find all the different viewpoints on the story to make sure that you don't get sued for a lot of money. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see... I think we're done with the news. I think we're done with the Times. We're going to sports. I'm not really interested in sports news. That's the news from the Times. As I said, I always use very different newspapers because you get very different viewpoints. Like, for example, The Guardian is probably the closest to my brain in terms of its perspective. But that also means that it often doesn't spark me off to write jokes because I just read things which I agree with, which are very boring. You know what I mean? It's not really interesting to stand on stage and say, oh, this is what I think. Okay, here's something I find slightly interesting. This is digital green certificates to allow the return of tourists. This is the idea of digital certificates after you've been vaccinated and you'll be allowed to travel. I think if I was going to turn this into a joke, in fact, I'll definitely turn this into a joke because this was a satirical show which I was writing tomorrow. Probably perspective would be like, but what else will be in the passport? You can't have a whole passport with just one stamp, which is the vaccine. You've got to put other stuff in the passport, right? There's got to be other things. And then I could suggest other things which you should have stamped before you are allowed to travel, right? Because there are many people who travel who I wish would not travel, right? So it's like, are you the sort of person who has loud drinking and singing parties in the hotel room next to Daliso Chaponda? You don't get a stamp. Okay, I'll come up with petty things, but it would be, what is that passport? How does this vaccine passport work? Do I put all my other stuff in there? Anyway, you see where I'm going. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? As I said, I haven't written any of this. This is just messing around. Okay, next one here. This one, again, would be just one of my one-liners. Teachers face epidemic of demotivated classes. And the first sentence is, children have suffered an epidemic of demotivation while out of the classroom during lockdown. No, that is being a child, okay? Children are not motivated to study. I don't know what kind of childhood you had. They are just children, right? They happen to be in an epidemic and in lockdown, but if they were in normal life, they wouldn't have wanted to study either, okay? So the joke would probably be something looking at that. As you can see, I'm flipping through many pages, very many pages. Oh, this is an interesting one. Which, if I had a broader segment, particularly because of what has recently happened in the news, it probably would look at sexual crimes, because police have been told to collect data on crimes motivated by misogyny, right? They always do this. I always find that after there's a terrorist attack, or after there's a race-related attack or a gender-related attack, government's like, let's collect data, right? We never ever get to the next stage often of what you do with the data, but there's always, let's collect data, because it feels like we're doing something. But at the same time, the data's already known, right? They do this with HIV all the time, right? I was talking to my brother about this. My brother's an infectious disease doctor. They would have meetings every year, different conferences, where they would discuss the HIV data and what's going on in the, how they're dispensing with, antiretroviral drugs and so on and so forth. And they'll always be collecting data and discussing data that everybody already knows to feel like they're doing something. They've got to go to the next step after collecting data to implementing change. So I would probably, I've just looked at the headline. I've not read the article, so maybe they are implementing more than collecting data, but just based on the track record of governments in the past, I think it's a high chance it's just, let's collect data so that we can tell people that we're doing something. No, you've got the data. You've got years of the data. What do you do next? I'm a comedian. I don't have the solution. But you need to be proposing solutions, not just saying, oh, we're going to collect more data about how misogynistic people and how much violence there is against women. We already have the data. Okay, let's keep going. Next thing. Here we go. Now it's opinions and so on. So I think we're done. I think we're done with The Guardian. Oh no, here we go. Oh, even better. Who knew that this whole episode... Now, I told you, no, you have stories, but you have a theme, a unifying theme. Maybe the unifying theme is something about how we deal with problems we know society has. Okay, because there's an article here talking about to make women safer, we need to educate men. Okay? But again, how? Educate them how? It's a very nice thing to say. Let's educate them. Educate them how? How are you going to do this? What are you going to add to the curriculum? What books are you going to add to the curriculum? What behaviors are you going to try? Let's have practical things. Otherwise, it's similar to collecting data. It's like a fake solution which doesn't do anything. I'll admit that I have done this. Like, if I'm in a relationship, we're having trouble, we're having a situation, I'll say, I will pay more attention to you. Right? I will pay more... This is my version of collecting data, because it's not really a tangible change. It's not like I'm doing something like, taking you out. It's like I'm doing something passive. I will pay more attention to you. So we can't just collect data or say that you need to educate. How are you going to educate? Who are the educators? Who are the experts who are going to correct our current education? What are the failures in the current education? I guess that's the data which we need collected. But this is something which I probably would talk about. Okay. I don't know about you, but I want to watch this episode. Okay. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I go to The Sun. Now, similar to the fact that The Guardian is the closest to my brain, this is actually the furthest from my brain. But it's very good, if you're writing jokes, to look at examples which are very far from your brain, because that often will motivate you to the funniest angles. Okay? Okay, over here, right straight away, I turn the page and I see a half-naked lady on page 3, which doesn't motivate, it actually hurts the joke writing. So I have to turn the page very fast, because you can't be funny while looking at a half-naked woman's breasts jiggling around. I don't know about you. Like, I've done comedy in a strip club. Done it twice in my life, once in Canada, once in Birmingham. It's very hard to be funny, right? Oh, the worst one was, this was so funny. I went with this friend of mine, Sugar Sammy. I went with this guy, Massimo. And who was the third one? There was one other person. So it was Massimo, Sugar Sammy, myself, and someone else. And I went on first. And this woman, she was a stripper, Canadian stripper called Tangerine Dream. Right? Tangerine Dream, with gigantic breasts, sees me entertaining these people. I guess she thinks I'm not doing well enough, decides to help me, runs on stage, and starts gyrating against me as I'm trying to tell jokes. I don't know how this was going to make me funnier. I don't know. To be fair, I forgot my punchlines right there. And what was even funnier is that I was the first comedian on, and the other comedians saw what a shambles it was, and they all decided not to go on. Chris Bonaparte, that was the other comedian there. I can't believe I remember the whole lineup. How hilarious. This was like 2004 or something. Okay, let's keep going. Here we go. Okay, next story here. Oh, here we go. Patsy Palmer fired off an F-word rant after shutting down a Good Morning Britain interview. What is going on with British morning television? People storming off left, right, and center, all kinds of drama. It's turning into a soap opera, trying to compete with EastEnders or something like that. We've got, Piers Morgan stormed out. We've got Patsy Miller fight. I think that's where my angle would probably be. It would be like, what kind of temperamental stuff is going on behind the scenes with British morning TV, and then I would probably extrapolate what I expect to happen next. So I'd be like, what's going to happen is like, is a murder going to be committed, and Lorraine has to to solve it, and then I'd probably get a friend of mine like Susan Murray who does an impression to do a Glaswegian impression like there's been a murder. And then I would have like, there'd probably be a sketch. That would be the sketch. It would be the soap opera of British morning shows, right? And like, Piers Morgan is secretly behind something. That's where we'd go. That's where we go. Just so you know. Here we go. Let's go. Let's go. What else do we have? Oh, here. I'll probably talk about this. Definitely talk about this. Not the EU jab. I'm talking about Cardi B. Cardi B doing Grammys, did a live version of WAP. It was very sexual. Very sexual. And I always almost feel sorry for musicians putting on performances who went to cause scandal. Because scandal is very good, right? Very good for your sales. Because you have to keep topping the previous scandals, right? And people like Madonna were doing these scandals, which, when you look back, was so vanilla, right? It's so funny when you look at the stuff which used to outrage people in the 80s. Right? It was very, very low level. It was like, oh, she's got cones instead of breasts. Oh, we're so offended, right? And then you keep going, and then you'll have someone like Miley Cyrus came out, in the blurred ride things, jumping around and licking a finger in a very phallic sort of way, made everyone scandalized. And then the next musicians try to top that, and this performance looked a lot like a strip club performance, right? It was very, very entertaining. It's been a year and a half since we were able to go to any of these establishments. I was very happy, but I also understand it pissed off a lot of these evangelicals. But all I think is, how are we going to top this, right? How are we going to top this? Because in a few years, some new entertainer is going to I got to scandalize them, and I got to top that. By the time I'm 70, right? I can only imagine the outpouring of filth which will have to occur at the Grammys in order to get anybody slightly shocked, because we have become highly desensitized. I don't know. Just dildos instead of microphones? I don't know. Okay, let's keep going. So I'll talk about that. Okay, let's keep going. I already have around 20 minutes worth of stuff, but I'm just sort of telling you how I would choose the subjects, right? This is how I choose the subjects. This is a very silly paper. Most of this stuff is very shallow, so I don't think, or depressing. I think that's enough. So that would be the step one. I will have chosen these stories. What's the next thing that I would do? Is I would sit myself, or usually I'd have a co-writer. If I was trying to do a show like daily or weekly, maybe a group of 2 or 3 writers. So like I've got a friend who I've done some co-writing with called Scott Bennett, very funny guy. We might sit down and I would write a bunch of jokes on the subject. He would write a bunch of jokes on the subject in a separate room. Then you meet and you pass ideas. You say, I thought the best angle on the the kissing professor was if we turned it into like a fairy tale situation where he kisses the frog and the frog's like, yo, I was just minding my own business. Why you just come into my swamp and kiss me, right? You gotta ask my consent before you kiss me, damn. Like, oh, what, you turn me into a prince? You think I like being a prince? Something like that, some fairy tale. And then he's like, no, this fairy tale angle is totally silly. You know how we should talk about it? We should look at it as, this professor going into his first class after the scandal. Can you imagine going in, he goes in, he starts making his lecture. Would he have any authority? What would the students say to him? And so on. And you throw around 5 or 6 of these, and one of them makes both of you laugh. One of them is like, that's the angle, right? I've not got the angle. I've just told you the stories, right? And usually it takes 4 or 5 different angles before you hit the angle. Like when I did the Meghan Markle story on the Now Show, I wrote around 10 jokes, and then I just saw the angle which I thought was funniest, which was pretty much, I'll tell you right, it was that they did the whole interview. They spoke about this mystery royal racist, but they didn't tell us who it was. How could they not tell us who that was? That's all I wanted to know. That is like if we watch an Agatha Christie and at the end they don't tell you who the murderer is, right? Was it Princess Plum in the drawing room after too many brandies? Tell me who it is. Just tell me who it is. And I go on a whole rant about I just want to know who it is, right? So but I'd come up with many different angles before that angle, right? So again, you throw around these ideas and you underline the best gags, right? So if you've got 10, 15 stories, you come up with 3 jokes for each one. Your co-writer comes up with 3 jokes as well. If you have a big budget, something like The Daily Show, maybe you have 10 writers and all of them come up with 3 jokes for each story. Then you all sit together, you say, these are my ideas. Whichever ones are the funniest get the biggest laughs, and they enter the script. Okay? This is what we do. Next thing is you look for sketches, things which are more than just gags. So things like my morning show as a soap opera, something which is more than just a joke. It's a premise which you can play with. We do that, right? Or just Lorraine solving murder mysteries, something very interesting about that. Do that for a while. Okay, so you've got, first of all, your jokes, then you've got your sketches, and then you need an editorial. You need something that makes it a show, that makes it more than just a bunch of jokes. What's like a recurring theme? And I actually think, based on the stories I've seen, the recurring theme would be either it would be ways in which government or so on make it seem like they're doing something when they're doing nothing. That is very interesting to me. And then that then would be a focus where you do more stories on that, you elaborate on that, and you have an ending thought which maybe isn't quite as funny, but is about that. You know, it's sort of like a unifying theme. It's either about that, or it would be about how we already know the problems. This is the thing, is we already know the problems. All the time they're saying, oh, let's find the data, let's educate men and make them less violent. We already know these problems. How do we then do it? Because I'll tell you what the biggest problem is, particularly about bringing up kids, is everybody has an idea of how to do it right. Everybody knows when people are doing it wrong, but they can't necessarily agree. We can't necessarily agree. It's very easy to say, let's bring up our children better, but have you talked to parents? As far as I know, and this is as someone with no children, trying to bring up children is like trying to herd a pack of wild beasts, right? That most of the time you're just trying to survive. You try to instill, morality, but most of the time you're just trying to make sure they don't kill themselves by sticking their fingers in things they shouldn't and eating things they shouldn't. It's a lot to put on families. So then if it's not families, then is it the state? Is it schools? How can we improve our education system? It's very easy to say the education system is wrong. What you change? How do you make it better? Right? And you look at how I was brought up, it was like, Lord of the Flies. We were definitely encouraging violence, but what would they have changed? How do you change it, And so I think maybe the unifying thing underneath the stories which I picked and the angles I took would be, it's very easy to point out the flaws. Now, what do we do next? So there we go. That's what the episode would be. Thanks for showing up at this random pop-up. How do we create a satirical show? And I said that I'm not famous enough, but you know what? Maybe I am. Maybe you are going to see this. Because, I've been thinking about this. A lot of comedians, right, are being, saying stupid things and losing their shows. So all I need to hope is that everybody ahead of me in the queue, everybody funnier than me, says something that jeopardizes their career, and at the end, all of the producers only have me to fall back on. In fact, you know what I need to do? I need to trick every comedian more famous than me into making a cancelable offense. This is what I need to do. I need to get them drunk, right? Get white comedians drunk, and then say, hey. So tell me, what's your real opinion about Botswana? I won't tell nobody. Meanwhile, I'm taping it, right? This is my plan. Every person more famous than me, I will sabotage your career, but I'll hack your... Maybe I shouldn't admit this, but when I get my show, you will know I got there.